to the Casual Birder podcast. I'm Susie Buttress. As a casual birder, I take pleasure in watching the wild birds around me, wherever I am. In my show, I share the joy of birding. I tell you about the birds I've seen, speak with experts and enthusiasts, go on bird outings, and I share stories from birders around the world. In case you missed it, last episode I spoke to Hannah Bourne-Taylor about her extraordinary experience raising a young abandoned finch, which she wrote about in her wildlife memoir, Fledgling. Do take a listen. If you'd like to support the show's production, you can buy me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. My thanks to everyone who supported the show in this way, and special thanks to Kirsty, who contributed after the last episode. You can find the links for Ko-fi in the episode notes. You can also support the show by speaking about it on social media or leaving a review. This goes a long way in encouraging others to try out the show. Please do remember to tag me in your posts. Global Birdfair provided me with wonderful opportunities to speak with birders and conservationists, and I was delighted to meet Sarah Humphrey, also known as Sussex Sara, on social media. Sarah is passionate about wildlife and conservation, and shares her fabulous photographs of birds and animals on Instagram. Educating others about responsible wildlife photography is important to Sarah, and her social media posts explain how she uses fieldcraft and careful observation to get awesome photographs without causing stress to the bird or animal being photographed. Sarah is also a big proponent of low-carbon birding, as we'll hear. How have you found Birdfair so far?
So this is my second Birdfair, and I was lucky enough to go to the one just before lockdown, and I love the atmosphere and the vibe at Birdfair because it really is that sense of community coming together, lots of people talking about their passions and connecting with great people like yourselves that you've not met before. And it's just such a beautiful day today as well. The sun's out and everyone's smiling. And I think we're all getting a little bit tired, but we're still really happy. So I really looking forward to next year's already.
That's wonderful to hear. Tell me a little bit about your birding passion.
So I got into birding when I started working in conservation, actually, and I started bird watching to try and understand a little bit about what my colleagues' work was. So it's quite a new thing for me. I've only been birding for about 6 years. I'm very self-taught because I don't have an awful lot of reserves or hides in my local area. So I just started by going for walks after work on my commute home. I'd get off at a rural train station, go for a wander with my camera, not knowing what I was really looking for, just as a way to connect with nature, get some exercise, decompress from a working day. And it's kind of grown from there, really.
Was there any particular draw about birds for you?
I think it's the fact that every single time that you go out and see wildlife, because it's not just birds for me, it can be all aspects of wildlife, you will find something new and unexpected. And what I tend to specialise in these days is finding that really unusual wild behaviour. So I seem to be able to capture some really mesmerising things that aren't often caught on camera, things like fighting adders, or weird predation behaviour, like I've seen a goosander trying to predate a dunlin. And you can't ever predict what you're going to see, and it's that excitement value for me. But it's also the community. So I will stop people who are wearing binoculars or share my sightings with people as I'm walking around the countryside. And everyone connects to nature in a different way, and I just love hearing about other people's experiences too.
Is photography like your first hobby?
I've always had lots of different hobbies. I've got a really bad habit of picking up a hobby, getting to a certain level with it and then moving on to the next hobby. I like to try new things and challenge myself quite a lot, and I think birding and wildlife photography is the one thing that I've stuck with for a really long time. I think that's my comfort zone now. But I started out with music photography, so live music. I used to put on bands and gigs for young people, so music photography and extreme sports as well. I used to really support our local extreme sports scene, do a lot of the BMX and skate photography for my friends in the community. And I think that's given me a really good ability to capture fast-moving subjects, because actually the skills that you need for live music photography and for sports photography are really transferable to wildlife. So when I started watching wildlife, I didn't realise how sensitive to disturbance some of our species were. So part of what I try to do through my photography is really ground people in how to act responsibly around wildlife, how to minimise negative impacts on particularly breeding birds, but all different kinds of species. And for me, those fieldcraft skills and knowing your animals and knowing what their alarm behaviour is, what their comfort zones are, and it will change depending on the individual animal, not even just the species. But learning how to read that wildlife really improves your relationship with the animals. It enables you to capture much better images that, for me, my photos kind of, it's trying to capture that personality of the animal with it making eye contact with the camera but not showing any sense of alarm or concern, because the last thing that we would want to do when photographing wildlife or engaging with wildlife is actually alter their natural behaviour. It's really important that we keep a respectful distance, that we don't trample habitat to get closer to a certain bird because that is their feeding habitat, for example. And so I teach a lot of the principles about responsible wildlife photography and responsible wildlife watching through my work.
Was that something that you developed by yourself, by just being aware of the animals around you, or had you been taught that?
So for me, it was understanding a bit more of the context of conservation and habitats. So I'd learnt that to find certain species, as I started to get more into birding, I wanted to find particular species. That meant I had to learn about their habitats, their breeding patterns, their food, their resting behaviour, and learning a bit more about the actual animal's behaviour and their preference types meant that I understood a lot more about the ecology in general. Then I could see how potentially human impact could start affecting those birds, particularly for some of our more at-risk species. There's also a load of laws that people need to bear in mind when it comes to photographing wild birds and animals in general. And people like ARC have done a lot of campaigning to highlight the fact that, say, adders, for example, actually one of the factors causing their decline is photographic pressure. So it can have a really negative impact on wildlife. And I wanted to try and help people understand that balance between taking amazing wildlife photos and capturing that amazing experience with being responsible and making sure that you're keeping your distance.
Can I just check what ARC means?
So it's the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation Society.
Thank you. So how do you do your teaching? Do you do it through workshops or through social media?
So it's primarily through teaching on social media comments. So if I take a picture of a certain bird, I'll perhaps put a little bit around how you can minimise disturbance for that species, particularly when it comes to things like reptiles and some of our sensitive breeding birds. I'll also talk about how important it is to sometimes keep stuff off of social media when it comes to certain locations to reduce the overall pressure. One person might not be a problem, hundreds turning up might be. So it's just the general principles, really, and making people a little bit more aware that it is an issue. And I think the more of us that can do that, who are wildlife photographers, the better it is for the sector. And I think the rise of mobile phone technology as well means that a lot of people are starting to look at how they can use mobiles to connect with nature, which is amazing. But if you're using a mobile phone, you have to get closer to get those quality shots. And I think it's a really important time for us to be considering making sure that people understand the impacts that we can inadvertently have. And nobody would ever intend to cause that disturbance. So it is just gentle education for me.
In terms of the local area, I know you said you were trying to get to 200 species this year in your county. How are you doing on that?
So yeah, I set myself just before the first lockdown. There's a challenge called My 200 Year that a lot of birders do, which is where they try and get to 200 bird species seen in a year. And I, very naively, quite new to birding, didn't realise how much of a challenge that would be. So I set myself that before I knew that the first lockdowns, COVID lockdowns, were happening. I've never actually hit it, but I came very close last year. So I got to 190, I think it was last year, with only 7 of those seen outside of Sussex. This year I'm aiming to see 200 in Sussex if I can. I'm really lucky where I live that it's such a good migration route that I can see lots of different species coming through at certain times of year. And I'm already up to 167 and it's July. So I'm quite hopeful, but the thing with the 200 year is you can get like 100 on your first day, and it gets progressively harder. So it's always going to be one of those challenges that you kind of keep in mind, but you might not achieve, but it's nice to have a goal to aim for.
Now, in terms of, as you said, you're on the migration route, a bird may make landfall and it's one that hasn't yet appeared on your list. What are your priorities in terms of trying to find that bird and add it to your list?
So I'm a big advocate for low carbon birding. I don't drive through personal choice. I want to keep my carbon footprint down. So I have to kind of make quite smart decisions sometimes between whether or not I can actually get to a bird, whether it's likely to stay for the time it takes me to hike across the South Downs to get to it, whether I can get to it by public transport, or whether I might just have to accept that the chances of me seeing that bird are quite slim. But that's all part of the fun for me. It's a bit of adventure. And it's quite exciting to know that things are likely to turn up or not likely to turn up, and try and make sure you're in the right place at the right time. So there's actually quite a lot of science involved in bird watching, and I find that really interesting. And it's one of those things that the more you do it, the more you learn, and there are so many experts out there. So building that community and getting involved with your local bird watching community is a really great way to learn that knowledge by osmosis.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's been really lovely speaking with you.
It's been a great pleasure talking to you guys. And if you're around at Birdfair next year, do come and say hi, because I'm aiming to be back here.
I've been reading through Sarah's Instagram posts and have learned so much. The photos and videos are truly awesome, and the accompanying text is a treasure trove of photography tips, species information, and thoughtful reflection. Do take a look for yourself. Find her on Instagram at Sussex_Sara. The link to her account is in the episode notes. Do keep in touch. Tell me about your sightings or your recommendations of places to see birds by leaving me a message on my contact form on my website casualbirder.com. As always, the links are in the episode notes. My thanks to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by the Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder podcast.